This only happened about a few years ago to one of my friends from high school. We'll call her by the name Kaylee, and Kaylee used to work at this gas station part-time. She mainly did night shifts, mainly because she had school in the morning and stuff, but she did night shifts. However, one night she had to do a double shift as since it was Friday and there was no school the next day, a co-worker couldn't make it because he called in sick. So she was a little annoyed that she had to work a double shift, but she knew it was extra pay at the end of the day. So she ended up taking the extra double shift, and she ended up really enjoying the quietness of the gas station. There was only very few people out and very late at night, mainly traveling to out of town and etc. However, as she waited groggily, she ended up looking up to see that there was someone pacing back and forth between the two gas pumps. Now this was really confusing to her since she didn't even recognize the man. He seemed to be wearing a hooded jacket and he was walking back and forth, making her extremely uncomfortable. She was gonna think of stepping out just to tell the man that he needed to leave, or she called the cops, but she had no idea if she should approach him or not. However, it wasn't until a few minutes later when whoever it was walked up to the front of the door and stared at her. Honestly, she didn't even know what to do. If she should call the cops or at least tell security about it. But however, she wasn't sure if she should tell this guy to leave. He didn't even look like a customer. In fact, he didn't have a car with him, so he could have walked somewhere to get gas to this way, but there was no vehicle, so this was suspicious. She ends up looking over and seeing that there was a black vehicle marked about maybe a few feet away from him. So she was confused as to why he was there. He turned around and walked back to the vehicle and ended up driving off into the middle of the night where she couldn't see him anymore. Kayla ended up reporting this to the police, but also reported her boss about this man, but chances are this man never came back and they never even found him. They didn't even know what his intentions were. All Kaylee could really do is the fact that this man probably had some intentions of hurting her. She was just really glad she didn't go over and open the door. And she was really glad that he didn't come in. Otherwise, it could have been ended much worse if she had opened the door or let him in or do God knows what. She doesn't work the night shifts anymore since that day, and she quitted her job about 2 weeks later as she can't stand the constant paranoia that someone was around the gas station. This story still terrifies her to this day, and she still has nightmares from even remembering it. Now, this only happened about maybe 2 or 4 years ago. I can't really remember, but it was around the time when the global pandemic was going on. This happened to someone in my high school whose name that I will give out as Charlie. Charlie was about maybe 17 at the time of the story, and he had been working at McDonald's for at least a year now. He mainly did some other stuff such as school, but he was also looking forward into going to college next year. However, his parents would support and pay half of it, but he had to come up with the other half of the money. So at this moment, Charlie ended up working at McDonald's, and there were a few nights where he had to do the night shift. The managers, being the jerks they were, gave him a list of night shifts for 1 week, which annoyed him even to the slightest, but still, he ended up getting the closing shifts. As he was working at McDonald's behind the register, he was counting the cash when all of a sudden there was this child. The child walks up to him, and she was literally looking like she was 6 or 7. And what also followed was this man. He seemed to be homeless and he looked like he was in his 40s. At first, Charlie thought that maybe it could have been his kid, but this was a little strange, seeing that this man looked a lot older and he didn't look like he was the dad. The man ended up saying, "Oh, can I get a Big Mac and a Happy Meal please?" he said. Charlie ended up serving him, but he looked at the little girl who gave eyes of pleas of help. Honestly, he wasn't even sure if he should ask this man any questions, but the man said he'd be back and be using the bathroom. The little girl stared into his eyes, and Charlie ended up asking her if she was okay, to which she said no, and that she said that she was taken about a few days ago by this man, and she was pretty much kidnapped. Charlie ended up going to the few co-workers, and they ended up protecting the little girl, while when the man came back, that's when Charlie ended up calling the cops. This man tried to put up a fight, but one of the big strong staff workers was able to pin the man to the ground. Obviously, he was arrested, and the man was taken away while the young girl was being transferred to the police station, where they would contact the parents that had reported her missing. Turns out that man was a little sex offender and child predator in the area, and he had been taking in young girls. It honestly really scares Charlie to know that this girl was in serious danger by this man. Whatever for stunts that this man was pulling was definitely something he would never forget. He doesn't even know why this man had taken the little girl, what was his intentions were at the McDonald's if he didn't get served. That still terrifies Charlie to this day. Charlie ended up quitting the McDonald's after he had enough money saved up for college, and he had never worked at the McDonald's again. He still isn't sure, or to this day, what would this man have done if he had not called the cops. Chances are this man could have hurt them or possibly do much worse damage than he already did. Okay, so I do want to apologize for how short this story is, but this happened to a friend of mine when he was working the night shift at the movie theaters. This happened way back in 2019 after the showing of It Chapter 2. It was on the opening night, which meant there was a lot of people interested in seeing the new It movie. It was Chapter 2, but it wasn't really as good as the first chapter. However, the second chapter didn't do that bad. This happened to one of my friends, which I'll call her by the name of Riley. Riley was doing the night shift at the movie theater, as she stayed usually after their midnight to clean up. It happened to be one night where she was scheduled to clean up the movie theater. She was pretty much just cleaning up by going to every theater and ended up picking up messes. Usually that was the janitor's job, but she was working with another girl named Jessica. As they were both cleaning up the movie theater, she ended up looking over to see that there was a figure. It happened to be a woman, and she was staying way at the back. At first, Riley thought that maybe she might have fell asleep during the movie, as this was the last showing, and everyone has already left the theater. Excuse me, ma'am, we're closed," Riley called up, but however the lady did not even budge or even spoke. Of course, Jessie asks Riley to check on the woman, seeing if she was awake, and that's what Riley did. Riley walked up to the woman and tapped her, asking if she was awake, when all of a sudden the woman leaned back, and that's when Riley made a horrifying discovery. She saw that her throat was slit, and apparently blood had dripped down all the way, soaking her clothes. It turns out that she was murdered, but there was no absolute clue as to who could have murdered this person. That's when Riley ended up nearly puking at the sight of the woman dead. She ended up telling Jessica about it, and they ended up reporting it to their manager, who later then called the cops. The cops arrived and took the body away, and that feeder was closed for a while, as they had to do some cleaning and find evidence as to who could have murdered that woman. It turns out on an autopsy that woman apparently was catnapped with two men who went to a movie theater, and eventually her throat was slit that night. How could anyone see those two men with that woman? What were they look like? What were their intentions were? And why did they do this to this poor woman? Now, of course, Riley came across other sick and weird things in the movie theater while during night shifts, but she never expected a murder mystery to find out. It really still haunts her to this day as to who could have been responsible, all those two men who could have been responsible for that woman's death, but it sure really scared the hell out of her. Riley still works at the movie theater now today, but she never had anything like this happen again. She still even wonders, and she even feels sorry for the woman who had died, and she felt sorry for her family who have lost their daughter. It was really heartbreaking that woman died by those two men, but there was no police report or update if those men were caught or not. So Riley can only hope that she had assumed that they were arrested, but there was no way of knowing if that was true or not. All Riley could do was wish and pray that those two men never returned to the movie theater again.